Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Will Tarashuk. I am the founder of Ambiguous Podcast Solutions, also the host of the Talking with Tarashuk podcast. But today, I am speaking with Chris Englebert, who is the founding partner and CAO of Englebert Financial. What is it, Chris? What's the name of the company? Englebert Financial Advisors. There it is.
Absolutely.
It is there
right
on the lower third right there. That's why I have the lower third there just to remind me. And today, we are speaking all about the police, because Chris, you wrote a book. I have the book right here, actually, right in front of me. Let me just pull out my mixer here. Right here. Here is your little handy dandy pamphlet. So I read this thing 2 or 3 times. We're gonna go through it, talking about Pennsylvania police officers retirement account. So Chris, are you ready?
Yeah, positive. Let's go.
So let's just general overview. Police officers. You know, you are an RIA, and your RIA, you focus on retirement investing. You know, we did a full episode on Talking with Tarashuk podcast, which I'll link down below. You guys can all check out a full hour talking about what Chris does for a living. But how'd you get so involved with police? You know, give me the backstory of your relationship with the police.
Yeah, well, it's literally started 30 years ago. We started doing police defined benefit pension plans as an investment advisor. And the more I got into it, the more I realized it was a tremendously underserved category as far as individuals go. So police officers, nowadays, most of them go to college. They then get, trained. They then become, a cop on patrol, and they're out there. Really, what they don't understand is they don't understand the basics of, their defined benefit pension plan, their 457 or their drop. And so what ended up happening was over the years, as we talked to more and more police officers, they kept saying to us, you guys have a tremendous knowledge in this area, you should really write a book. And so, finally, during COVID, what do you do when everybody's, locked up at home? You do those projects that you never had time to get to. And that's where we came up with financial planning and retirement strategies for Pennsylvania police officers. And what we're really trying to do is educate them literally from the start of their career to obviously the end of their career. Now, I give back to the community because there's a couple of police officers training centers around. And so in another couple of weeks, I'm going to go down and speak to a graduating class of young police officers because, again, there's the business of being a police officer, but the problem is they just don't get any information on what happens during the end of their career. And that's really what we're trying to do. And it's very specific knowledge you have to have when you're talking to police officers. So,
right. Well, it's very hard being a cop. Cops get a bad rap, sometimes deserved, sometimes not deserved. We're not going to touch upon social issues on the police in this podcast. That's why you're here. Sorry, not this time, maybe next time. But when it comes to police officers, you say now is one of the best times to become a police officer, which, avoiding that sticky subject, that's hard for me to believe. Is it because... Well, why? I'll let you tell me before I kind of prematurely assume why it's now a good time to be a police officer. Let me hear it, Chris.
Well, it's a tremendous time because literally only 10 short years ago, you would have municipalities post police officers' jobs, and they would get 50, 75, 100 people saying, hey, I want to become a police officer because the pay is good, the benefits are great. And oh, by the way, I get something called a defined benefit pension plan when I go to retire. But obviously over the last 6-7 years, the media, the stigma has really caused a lot of young people not to consider policing as a career, and they're making a huge mistake. The number one reason why is the starting pay is the highest that I've ever seen it since I've been counseling police officers. They've got to pay them more because they're competing with warehouse jobs. They're competing with other, higher paying jobs. So naturally, you got to pay more. The benefits are really, really good. But more importantly, it's a numbers game. I had a police chief tell me the other day that in a county, they had 200 applicants countywide for open police positions. He said after the written test, 40 of them failed. They had 160. And then you had to do an in-person physical fitness test, they had 60 no-shows. So he's like, we're down to 100 police officers for the entire county. And he said, what's going to happen is out of the 100 no-shows, you then have to do a background check, and 30 to 40 are going to get bounced out with the background check. So you're going to have 60 candidates for potential 200 slots that are going to be opened for new police officers. So there's a real cry for getting, manpower and women power. We're seeing a lot more women becoming police officers now than we've ever seen before. But the other thing that's happening is that it used to be that, policing was kind of, you'd work 10 or 15 years as a police officer, maybe make sergeant, corporal, lieutenant. But the real gig to get is obviously to become a police chief. And the problem was there was always very highly qualified police officers, but they could never become a police chief. Now, in our area in Southeast Pennsylvania, literally 50% of all the police chiefs are going to be retiring in the next 5 years. So that means there's a tremendous room for advancement out there. So if you become a police officer and you do a good job, you're going to get paid well. In fact, I have young police officers, literally 25, 26, 27 years old, working overtime, making $100,000 a year. And now there's room for advancement, which there never was really before up until the last couple of years. So I can't ever describe. I mean, I know, because of the social issues, I know because of the stigma, a lot of people don't think about policing. But again, it's literally the best time I've ever seen to become a police officer now.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, the jobs are there. The availability is there. I mean, it's basic supply and demand. And you mentioned, you got to pay them more. That was a big theme of the podcast we did together. You got to pay workers more. Mm-hmm. But I do want to say the police chiefs, because you brought it up, and that was like the most surprising part of this book. So explain the employment contract of a police chief, and like, why is it so different from any other officers, right? You want to become a police chief because it's like the police chief is the highest rank you can go in police.
Right. Yeah. So you're the police chief of whether it's a small municipality, a borough, or a large township. You could have anywhere from 8 officers, and you as the police chief have to become one of the law enforcement officers. You go out on patrol, you ask, answer calls, etc. Right. Or if you got a bigger police department, you might have 80 or 90 police officers, and you're the police chief, and then there's assistant chiefs and captains, etc. But again, I write a chapter in my book, why you want to become a police chief, because if you can find a smaller police force, they're crying for well-trained police chiefs is what they're crying for. Now, most of the time that I've seen is that the police chiefs have a separate employment contract than the rank and file. So they can put things in their contract, and they have a 3-year or 4-year contract, whatever the case may be. I've seen municipalities where they've given a police chief 4-year contract, and just like professional sports, after 2 years, the township supervisors are like, hey, you're not working out for us, etc. They still got to pay the police chief for the following 2 years. So the police chiefs tend to be apart from the collective bargaining agreement that the rank and file has. And so many times they have things in their, collective or in their agreement that they don't have in a collective bargaining agreement. When we start talking about drops, I'll bring that up again, because that was one way drops ended up becoming very popular, is because they would put a drop in to get rid of the police chief. Well, then the rank and file, by law would end up getting it. So, police chiefs are a good gig if you can get it. I mean, one of the things I see happening over and over again is, there's a lot of training that goes into being a police chief, a lot of specialized training. And that's another reason why law enforcement is becoming more attractive, is because there's getting to be a lot more training than there ever was before. But what I see happening is a police chief will retire, and rather than sitting on the beach, a small municipality will call him up and saying, hey, can you please come and be our intern chief for 1, 2, 3 years? To help turn our department around and get it more professional, et cetera. That goes on all the time. And so there you are as a police chief. You've already got your pension, and now you're going to, be employed again for a couple of years. So if you can get it, police chief's a good gig.
Well, you touched upon it too, right? A lot of them are going to be retiring. So you get these new guys coming in, or girls coming in. They're going to be young. They might still be green. Especially with police officers in general, just dropping like flies, just quitting the force. They're gonna need training. And so who's better to train them than a former chief? They become a consultant. right?
Yeah.
So like, would they still get their retirement benefits because were they technically not retired? Like, how would
No, they end up literally retiring and collecting their defined benefit pension, and then they turn
become
around.
like a consultant? Okay, so it's
Yeah,
like,
and then
it's like part-time,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
then they turn around and get paid again. And many times I have numerous police chiefs, retired and active, as clients, and our biggest problem is how to shelter that money, from taxes is what it ends up becoming. So
that is that is a sweet gig. Yeah, no complaints there from being a police chief. Okay, so let's actually talk about the basics: retirements, and pensions. Right? If someone's going to ask me about a month ago, how do policemen retire? I would have guessed a pension. Right now, someone my age doesn't really know what a pension is, or
right.
or like they don't really exist anymore. Right? Like I know my mother was in a school. Social worker for a high school for like years and years and years. I think she has a very small pension. My Uncle Phil worked for the airlines. He has a very small pension. But I would have guessed the most common thing for a cop or a fire department's public service would have been a pension. So pension 101, what is the defined benefit pension for police officers?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And so you're exactly right. In the private sector, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was something called a defined benefit pension. And people are like, oh my gosh, what's defined benefit means? Well, it's the name, defined benefit, which means when you go to retire, your benefit or how much you're going to get paid is spelled out for you. So in the case of Pennsylvania police officers, they're covered under a state statute called Act 600. Act 600 says that if you reach age and years of service, and it may vary according to your local municipality, they may have an age 53 with 25 years of service. Usually the service is always 25 years, but every municipality in their collective bargaining agreement, the police are trying to get what the Pennsylvania state police have is age 50 and 25 years of service. Some municipalities have that, most of them don't, but they try to get age 50 and 25 years, but most commonly it's like age 55 and 25 years of service. So that means if you meet age and years of service, you get a defined benefit, which is 50% of your last 3 years salary. So if your last 3 years salary or your last 3 years W-2 income has been $100,000 a year as a police officer, you're going to get a $50,000 defined benefit plan for the rest of your life. It's very attractive because, again, like you said, the private sector doesn't have it. The only people that have defined benefit plans anymore are police and teachers. And lo and behold, our practice, we've been starting to get a lot of teachers as well because we understand how these defined benefit plans work. Now, the good thing about a defined benefit plan is that it's literally a payment made to you every month for the rest of your life. So if you're a 56-year-old police officer, you're going to get paid that $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. Remember, again, it's 50% of your last 36 months of W-2.
Yeah, let's pause right there, Chris, because I gotta explain that math to me. So let's just say, keep it simple numbers, right? They make $100,000 each year for the last 3 years.
Yep.
So that means that the average would be $100,000.
Right.
So they would get 50K, 150K, or is something so just be 50K?
No, they get $50,000 a year for their pension. So it's 50% of your last 3 years. Yeah.
Okay, and that's every year?
Yep, they get that every year. It's
until
typically,
they die.
Yeah, until they die. And so that's the good news about it, is that you get this $50,000. Now, many times I say to couples, I'll have a police officer and his husband or wife retire, and I'll say to them, do you understand that your pension is the equivalent of having $1.2 million in bonds? And the wife looks at the husband like, we have $1.2 million? I'm like, you don't have it, but if you had 1.2 million, that's what I need to generate a $50,000 a year pension. So they get that pension. The good news is they get that $50,000 for the rest of their life. The bad news is we obviously have inflation. So if you retire at age 56 with a $50,000 a year pension, actuarially, you're probably going to live to 86. Now, I know some people say police officers die sooner. Yeah, maybe not. I mean, medicine is a lot better than it was 20 years ago. But the point being, you could be on a fixed or defined benefit pension for 30 years. And with inflation, that's going to eventually erode down your buying power. So defined benefit plans, defined benefit pensions are great. Don't get me wrong, but you got to do something in addition to that defined benefit pension in order to be able to retire reasonably.
Right, and you also mentioned like different plans. There's the 457 plan, the drop. Now, if you do a defined benefit plan, can you not also do a 457 plan?
Yeah, you can,
You
absolutely.
can.
In
So
fact,
you can mix and match.
yeah, in fact, well, your defined benefit plan is going to be your defined benefit plan.
Right.
We call the 457 plan the icing on the cake. So in the private sector, it's called a 401k plan. If you work at a hospital, nonprofit, school, it's called a 403b. In the municipal or public sector, it's called a 457 plan. Works very similar to a 401k. The thing, Will, that I see that's really a shame is young police officers not signing up for their 457 plan immediately upon becoming a police officer. If you're a young police officer and you're living at home and you're making 60, 70, 80 grand a year, if you could front load how much you put into your 457 plan, you will literally have $1 million upon retirement. Right. So what happens with the 457 plan is usually we get police officers who are 10 years from their end of their watch or end of their career, and they're like, hey, I need to save some additional money. And oh yeah, by the way, if I put money into the 457 plan, it saves me on taxes. So if you're a police officer making 100 grand a year, you put 10 grand into a 457 plan, your W-2 shows that you made 90 grand. So there's that $10,000 worth of tax savings. We have, Will, many police officers that max out their 457 plan every year. And what's really interesting is that this year, over the age of 50, you can put $30,000 into it. So we call the 457 plan the icing on the cake, because what ends up happening is you get to the end of your career, you turn on your defined benefit plan, then you have your 457 plan, which has a couple $100,000 in it. You roll that over to an IRA. That's what's going to supplement your income from the erosion you lose to inflation when you get to be 65, 70, 75, et cetera. So a 457 plan is a very important part. And unfortunately, we see a lot of police officers, they don't understand it. It's called 457. Sometimes in the police world, they slang it as deferred comp. That's not really the good name. It's called a 457 plan. But again, we just started a plan last year, a major township. And it was the first time they had a 457 plan. They have 30 police officers and they have like 25 or 30 non-uniform employees. And when we went to them, the finance director was like, hey, we need to start a 457 plan. Turned out the finance director was a CPA from the private sector. And when she realized that there was something called a 457 plan for municipal workers, she's like, we got to start this. So she was a driving force. Well, these police officers, the township manager made the statement that, oh, I thought 457 plans were only for police officers. That's why we didn't put one in, because we thought it was an extra benefit. It's not an extra benefit. It's something that a municipality can offer to everyone at the municipality. So police officers really need to understand their 457 plan and start it as early as possible.
Well, you mentioned a few buzzwords there for me, and I'm going to get to maximum, so don't let me forget maximum. But, this plan does sound great. I have a 401k thing, even as a contractor, which I'm very lucky to have, which I'm very thankful to have. I've been working, other than 10 months when I was unemployed, since I exited college in 2017. I got 2 different retirement plans. 401k is huge. The maximum I can give is 15%. Now, I need more than 15%, so I give 10%, right? I give 10% of my money pre-tax into 401k, which is just huge because I see that grow and grow and grow and grow and grow.
Right.
Like, why isn't a 450? Like, why don't I have the option to do a 457 plan? Like, why is this section cut off in different parts of the market? Like, in other industries might have a 304 plan or whatever, insert number or name here. Why is this? This is more of a general systemic question. Like, why is it separated? This is America, Chris. This is the free market. This doesn't sound very meritocracy to me.
Yeah, it's just the IRS code. It's really the IRS code. The IRS code, portion of the IRS code says, here's what a 401k is, and here's who it's for. Here's what a 403b is. Here's who it's for, and here's what a 457. So their 457 plans and 403b plans are a little bit different than a 401k plan. There's some things that you have to do. We do 401k plans at our shop. But really, again, the main point about the 457 plan is it's for municipalities. It's really who it's designed for. It's got some things in it that I wish it would have. For example, the main difference between a 401k and a 457 plan is in a 401k, your employer can match. So if your employer puts in 4% and you put in 4%, you can get a match. Well, in a 401k, and this is getting in the weeds a little bit, if your employer puts in a match, you could still put in the maximum, which for 2023 under the age of 50 is 22.5. In a 457, the municipality can put money into the 457 on your behalf, but it cuts down how much the employee can put in. So in a 457, if a city or a township or a borough puts $2,000 into, the 457 plan, well, then the employee can only put in 2,000 or 20,500. So there's some subtle differences between the two. But again, the biggest mistake that we see is that 457 plans aren't taken advantage of. The other big difference in the 457 versus the 401k world is you're actually better off in the 401k world from the standpoint that the Department of Labor has said that all fees in a 401k have to be shown to the participant. So every year in your 401k, it says Will paid this, this, and this in his 401k. A couple of years ago, the Department of Labor was going to make 457s and 403bs totally transparent to show all the fees. Well, guess what? Guess who the biggest providers in the 457 world are? Insurance companies.
No,
they're insurance companies.
Yeah, of course.
And so I just got a 457 today. We have a product called Pantera, where if we don't actually manage the 457, if we're the advisor to the 457, we have a product called Pantera where I can actually manage the police officer's 457 plan. So the police chief, said, hey, I want to do that because I could never get into this municipality to be a 457 provider. So I said, sign up for Pantera. I'll manage your 457 plan for you. I'm telling you, Will, I got on there and I looked at the fund lineup and I looked at the costs. The costs are almost double what people pay in the 401k world. I'm not kidding you. It's a little insane. But again, the Department of Labor about 7 years ago was going to say, we're going to make all the costs transparent. The huge pushback came from the insurance industry because they didn't want to show all the costs and have them transparent because guess what? They're charging so much more. Yeah. So, again, there's no question about it. And so the 457 is good. I mean, we run a 457 like a 401k. We show all the fees. Our fees are hyper competitive. But when I see some of these other 457 plans run by other companies, it's not good. But again, an officer should take advantage of their 457 plan. No question about it.
Right.
So.
All right, let me touch upon maximums real quick. Maximums annoy me, right? Like, why is there a government-mandated maximum mandate on how much money I can save for my retirement, right? I guess you can just open multiple accounts. I'm sure there's loopholes and things you can do this, that, the other. But the idea of like the maximum amount I can contribute to any account is just like, why? Why? Yeah. Other than this, you want to be ridiculous. Like, especially like a Roth, right? A Roth IRA. Sometimes it makes sense. Like a Roth, I guess, can make sense because it's probably taxes more than anything else. But maximums just annoy me. It's a thorn in my side.
I agree with you. I mean, if we're going to solve the retirement problem, I mean, they've been raising, people don't realize this, but 401ks, 457s, 403bs, 10 years ago, the maximum you could put in was about $14,000. So right now, if you're over the age of 50, you can put in $30,000. If you're under the age of 50, 22.5, and they are indexing how much you could put in for inflation finally. But I agree with you because, you would see people saving a lot more money. I mean, if you get a husband and wife working, the kids are gone, college is paid for, the house is, and they're making a combined income of $200,000, $250,000. If they could sock away 50, 75 grand a year in a 457 plan or 401k or 403b, that would be huge. But I agree with you. There should be, a much higher maximum that you could put in.
Yeah. So if I got the cash to save, let me save it. Let me save it.
And you bring up a very important point because we see this quite a bit where we see people becoming inefficient with what they're saving. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is I'll see a police officer putting $8 grand a year in his 457 plan, but he's got 50 grand in a savings account. And I'm like, well, where'd that 50 grand in the savings account come from? He's like, well, we've just been saving it. I'm like, you're saving it in the wrong bucket. You're saving it in the savings account, which should be termed a don't pay me any interest account. Although savings accounts are coming up, they're whopping almost 2% now. But the point is, you should be putting more money into your 457 plan if you are inefficient and have too much money in a after-tax account, is what you should end up doing. So
yeah, no, my savings account is just a digital sock drawer at this point.
Yeah, there you go.
But I make good use of it. All right, so before we actually get into strategies and like how cops can take advantage of this and learn this and all that stuff, we got to talk about drop accounts because you didn't mention drop accounts. Now, to me, drop accounts kind of seemed like once an officer turns 50, they just kind of push them out, right? Is that kind of what it is? But before we even get to what an account is, but why? I understand why you don't want a 52-year-old officer on the street,
right?
But they're still valuable to the station, to the force, as even in the consulting role. Like paperwork still needs to be done in the officer world. So 50's also not that old. 50's new 30. So why?
Well, so drops are a little controversial.
Okay.
We've been a big proponent of them for the last 20 years because the way I talk about a drop account, so drop stands for Deferred Retirement Option Program. So a municipality can put in a drop account for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Basically, technically, the police officer retires. They calculate his pension. He's still working, but they put that pension amount in a sub account that when he is done, that money rolls over to an IRA. So let's say we're going to use the example that they have a 3-year drop. And the police officer, his last 3 years, he's averaged 100 grand a year, which means his pension is going to be $50,000 a year. That means a drop account is going to get $50,000 put into it each year. He's still going to be working, but really what it is, it's two things. It's a human resource management tool, and it's a retirement option. So in the private sector, they've done early retirement options for the last 30 years. I mean, in my career, I've seen AT&T, Lucid, here's one that'll date you, Bethlehem Steel. They all did early retirement packages where they would get senior guys and they'd say, we're going to pay you this much to basically go away. So it's the same thing with the drop. And you're right. It typically is not as attractive to younger officers. Like if your municipality has, for your retirement, age 52 with 25 years of service, you may sit there at 52 and go, I don't really want to retire. Well, maybe they need to have an incentive because every police officer will tell you policing is a young man's sport. You don't want to be a 50-year-old police officer with your gun belt, your vest on, getting in and out of your patrol car, 15, 20 times a day. Mm-hmm. If you can move to an inside job, administrative job, obviously you can last much longer. If you become a police chief, captain, lieutenant, et cetera, those are what I call non-contact sport policing, but you can last longer. But again, what ends up happening with most police forces is municipalities, when they hire police officers, in a perfect world, they'd hire a police officer one every year over a 10-year period of time. Instead, what happens is the municipality grows and all of a sudden they're like, hey, we need 8 police officers. So they hire 8 police officers in a 2 or 3 year period of time. Mm-hmm. So what it ends up happening is as these officers get closer and closer to retirement, some of them, don't have any incentive to retire. So you as a municipality have to say, wait a minute, how do we get these guys to retire? We put a drop in. And there's been some very interesting twists on how the drop works. Because again, let's say your retirement's age 52 with 25 years of service, you have a 3-year drop, you're going to be a police officer until you're age 55. You're still working as a police officer, obviously, to get the drop. What happens when you're done being a police officer? The drop account rolls over to an IRA. Your 457 rolls over to an IRA. You have a really nice IRA that's in conjunction to your pension. But I've seen situations, and this goes back to what we were talking about as far as police chiefs, where we had a police chief who was 70 years old that refused to retire. The municipality said, we're going to put a drop in, a 3-year drop. If you enter the 3-year drop, you're going to be getting X amount of money at the end of 3 years. He entered the drop immediately. At 73, he finally was done being a police chief, and he ended up retiring. Unfortunately, he died a year later.
That job kept him alive, Chris. I'm telling you.
Yeah, but what happens for those police officers in their 50s and 60s? I mean, I had another municipality, I had a township manager say, I got a 62-year-old police officer that's basically an overpaid administrative assistant we can't get rid of. So what they ended up doing, something very smart, they ended up putting in what's called a progressive drop, where if you reached age and years of service, you got 4 years in drop. If you waited a year, you got 3. If you waited 2 years, you only got 2. Well, guess what? This guy went in the drop immediately because he was going to maximize the amount of money that he had in drop. But again, I tell municipalities, it's a human resource management tool. Because if you think about it, you have a senior officer making 120 grand a year with 20,000 in benefits. That's 140,000. What ends up happening is that when you finally retire him, you can actually hire 2 younger police officers to replace that one older police officer. And if you're a good municipal manager, what you do is you watch the people in drop. It's the same with the police chief. You watch your guys in drop and you say, hey, listen, this guy's 2 years into a 4-year drop. We better start hiring younger officers and get them trained up. So when this guy does retire, we can hit the street. I had a conversation with the police chief just the other day. He was beside himself. He's a small force. He's got 8 guys on his force, and 3 of them are in drop, and they're all leaving this summer. So he's going to have 5 officers, and he cannot hire new officers fast enough to replace these 3. So in some cases, it's a good human resource management tool. In other cases, you better use it as a resource management tool.
Right. It's only so many people can have on the force. It's kind of like we're going to push out the window. We're going to make sure you land on a mattress.
Well, what's really, if some people understood, like we handled the entire drop for a very big city. They had 22 police officers go through drop. And the mayor, instead of saying, I got 22 guys leaving, I know when they're going to leave, and start hiring, he waited till they all left. And I mean, this police force was severely understaffed for about a year.
That sounds like a bad mayor.
Yeah. It was not a good situation. Yeah. And they've since staffed up, but he because he was saving so much money by having 20 officers, not, payroll, benefits, etc. His budget looked really good the following year, but they were severely understaffed. So
now, can you as an officer request a drop, or does the municipality have to come to you?
It's usually gone through for collective bargaining. When they do their police contracts, they collective bargain and get a drop in. Most of the drops that we see put in are 3-year, 4-year, 5-year. Most municipalities now have the drop because, again, they're beginning to see the value as a human resource management tool. They're finally getting it. I'm very surprised. There's still some police forces that don't have it. They're either been fed wrong information about how the drop works, or, it's just, there's a lot of animosity and jealousy sometimes between, administrative officials who are non-police officers going, well, I'm running this township or I'm running a city, and when you retire, you're going to get a defined benefit pension and I'm not. And oh yeah, you're going to get this drop and I'm not. And so sometimes, for the wrong reasons, there's some animosity, but the good city managers, township managers, borough managers understand how to use it as a human resource management tool. And for the most part, in Southeast Pennsylvania, a large number of the municipalities have the drop in place. So,
all right. Well, Chris, that covers chapter 1. All right. glad we got through that one. All right. So strategies. So we got strategies for new cops of 10 to 12 years, and cops approaching retirement. So strategy for new cops. So this is my main question, right? This is more another kind of systemic thing that can be used in all professions. How much pensions, drop accounts, 457, all the plans, how much of that is actually taught in the academy or in training? And then this could bleed into a lot of professions, right? Like I knew what a 401k was, but I didn't know what it was, right? I knew a 401k was a retirement account, but that was about it. I didn't learn about 401k until I Googled it, and I had my girlfriend tell me about it because she's in personal finance. But I think this could also be huge for college athletes as well. Mm-hmm. Like college athletes, right? They should be put into classes, sure, but they should be taught how to be a professional athlete, especially with their finances. I'm sure you've seen Broke, all the football players who go broke. So how much, sticking to police officers now, how much is actually taught in the academy, and what are the resources available for a young cop? And after that, what are the common mistakes they make, other than them being 20-somethings and they just don't care?
Right. Well, unfortunately, the resources are zero. I mean, that's why we wrote the book.
Damn, really? Zero?
Yeah, literally zero. They go through the academy. They're trained on, case law. They're trained on how to arrest people,
firearms,
firearms.
Stuff they should be trained on. But why isn't financial literacy taught in these courses for any profession, not just the police?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't. That's why we wrote the book, Will. Right. I mean, I can't tell you how many police chiefs, get our book and they give it to all their, police officers, because again, you become a young police officer. It's exciting. You're doing something, it's a law enforcement career. And literally what they don't talk to you about is what you should do or what's your strategy. Because again, like I said, you could be 25, 26 years old and with overtime be making $100,000 to $110,000 a year, literally 3 years out of the academy. And that's a lot of money for a young person. So, the number one problem I see is they don't ask enough questions. When I go to speak to the training class, I ask how many of them in the training class already have jobs, and about 60% of them raise their hands. They've already got a job with the municipality. And I say to all of them, you need to ask questions. What's the defined benefit plan look like? What's my age and years of service? We all know years of service is 25, but one municipality, it might be 53, one it might be 52, one it might be 54. Ask that question. What's their 457 plan? How do I sign up from it, for day one? Do you have a drop? Now, a lot of them, they're just not thinking that far in the future. So I always laugh because when I start out my presentation to these training classes, I always say, my name's Chris Englebert, Englebert Financial Advisors. I am from the future and I'm coming back to the past 25 years to talk to you, because you will be talking to somebody like me or me 25 years from now. Mm-hmm. And so if I can give you the inside baseball when you start out your career, you will be able to retire very, very comfortably as a police officer. And so again, these young police officers, they're all, hepped up with the training and a certification and everything else, but they don't, they're all excited about the beginning, but they don't, they don't ask enough questions about what happens at the end of your career.
That's very typical among young people.
Yeah.
That's just comes with being a 20-something-year-old kid, where it's just, you don't think about when you're 60, 70, 80 years old.
And the biggest mistake I see them make is they get, and this is a fancy word for debt, they get over leveraged. You're 25, 26, 27 years old, making 100, 120 grand a year. You could afford a $500-600 a month car payment. You could afford a 2020. I had a police chief one time. I was in his office and he's like, "Hey, come over here and let's look out the window." And we look out the window and he's like, new pickup truck, new BMW, et cetera. And this police chief was a tremendous saver. He was very financially astute, but he's like, I don't know what to say to these young people, because they start making this kind of cash and they start buying cars and trucks and homes. And they end up, I've seen it over and over again. I'm like, how much money are you putting a year into your 457 plan? I'm putting $2,000. Yeah, I'm putting $2,000 a year. I'm like, $2,000? Are you kidding me? And they literally, the biggest mistake I see them make is they get tremendously over leveraged. I mean, they'll be making $100,000 or 110 grand a year, and they get married. If they're smart, they marry a teacher, or they end up marrying a nurse. We see a lot of that, and they'll have a two income of $250,000, and they'll be in a $600,000 house with two $500 a month car payments. Yeah. And they're not putting enough money in their 457 plan. So,
well, you got to beat it into them, metaphorically. Like, listen, you can have both. Like, right. if I was making $150,000 a year, I already save as much as it is with as much money as I make. It's not crazy amount of savings, but I put money away for a rainy day or things I need. Mm-hmm. But some people don't do anything, which is, but my point is, if I had $150,000, I would live that lavish lifestyle. I would travel more, right? I don't care about cars, but I would upgrade to a different apartment when this lease is up, right? I would get a luxury building with a gym and a foyer and the doorman and all that fun stuff, right? But I would still make sure I put away more money. I had 10% of my 401k. I would move up to 15, right?
Yeah.
I would open a Roth. I would do these other things and budget in the lifestyle I want to live. So you guys got to pretty much just teach them. You can do both. You don't need 3 trucks. You can have 2 trucks.
Right. And it's funny you say that because we had a young officer at a township. He just transferred from Philly. You're getting a lot of Philly cops, obviously, living in the city of Philadelphia.
Yep.
And you can transfer a 457 to another 457 plan, just like you can do 401k to 401k. And so he was starting at this township, and I said, okay, let's transfer your 457 plan. And he was like 27 years old, and he had 30 grand already in his 457 plan. And I'm like, this is huge. I said, what's going on? He's like, when I started 4 years ago at City of Philadelphia, I had a sergeant take me by the shoulder, walk me downstairs, and make me fill out the paperwork to put this kind of money away. He knew I lived at home. I didn't really have any bills, and that I could afford to say. I said, do you understand at age 27, 28, having 30, 40 grand already is huge. And so some of them get it. Don't get me wrong. Some of them get it. Some of them are hyper savers. But for the most part, they got to have a strategy. And like I said, the 2 things I see young police officers make as far as the biggest mistakes is too much debt and not enough in their 457 plan.
Right. Well, luckily they do grow out of it. Right. Most young people grow out of it. They hit 30. I think 30 is that big wall. There's a reason why us young people stress about 30 years old, because it's like, it really is that point where you pivot. And you go, you get married, you have kids, you start thinking about your career more. It's less about this booze on Friday night and more about books on a Saturday morning, right? Stuff like that. So let's go into the strategy for a 10 to 12-year-old, 12-year-old cops. That'd be amazing. 10 to 12-year experienced cops. Because then they're going to start having a family, right? So how should a cop balance saving for their family, their home, their own retirement, their kids' college, if they want to go to college? The older they get, the more expenses they have and the more responsibility they have. So balance. It's all about balance. And this is good advice, not just for cops. This is good advice for anybody. So, but specifically for cops, with the options and tools they have, how do they balance, kids, their college, the house, and the car once they hit 30 years old?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm not going to deny it. And that's why, like I said, if you're a young police officer, if you can front load your 457, well, maybe when you get to that middle part of your career, 12, 15, 16 years on the force, again, you're right. You have the mortgage, you have kids 529 plan, you need to put some money in your 457 plan. People do this. I got to do all this or all that. And I'm like, no. If you got to cut down your 457 plan, cut it down. Start a 529 plan for your kids, to help save for college. I mean, there are more buckets that you have to do, but again, at least do something in each bucket is what you want to do. The number one killer, no pun intended, that I see during that period of time for those police officers is divorce. I have police officers that are either married to the same woman for 30 or 40 years, or they're on their second marriage with a whole nother set of kids. I don't know what it is, but I always counsel, if you're going through a divorce, finish one thing before you start another is really what you have to do. Because what happens obviously in a divorce to your first wife is she can attach to get some of that defined benefit pension when you retire, when you hit what they call superannuation, which is, retirement age, whatever it is for your municipality, age 52 or 53 with 25 years of service, and you get your pension. She can get part of that pension is what she can end up doing, from that standpoint. So, there's that danger of those, police officers 10, 15 years on the force, where they go through divorce. They're getting pulled in all directions. They're usually making much more money. But again, they've got the house, they've got the kids. And so what I say is, again, don't over leverage. Don't buy too much of a house. Again, a 2-income couple, police officer, and a nurse, or a teacher could easily afford a $600,000 home. But hey, what about a $400,000 or $450,000 or, something more modest so that you're not squeezed so tight? Unfortunately, in the 457 plan world, police officers, depending upon the 457 plan, can take a loan out. And we see police officers that get too much debt, they get overstretched, and they're constantly borrowing against their 457 plan, to try to make ends meet. And I'm like, you're really, depth charging in a bad way your retirement, because a 457 plan is supposed to help you once you retire. But if you're borrowing against it, and again, not all police officers do that, but these are the mistakes I've seen is, the middle part of your career, you're still over leveraged, you get a divorce, you borrow against your 457 plan. You should be thinking about the end game at that time, right. Because if you're 15 years on the force, you're rolling in, and 10 years can go like that. You're going to be eligible for retirement is what you're going to end up doing.
Right, so let's stick with the topic of divorce, because unfortunately it is very common in police officers more than other professions.
Right.
And I think, stress of the job, not being home, the hours, that can all play a part into it. But why is a spouse entitled to the retirement benefits of a cop? Right? I understand salary, right? That money's being pooled together, they live together. She's entitled to that because it's their money. But
right.
Why is a spouse entitled to money that they haven't touched it, that's designed for when they're not together anymore? Right.
Well, that's why divorce is bad. Because
right. Are there ways to, anyone can protect themselves from that? Like a prenup? Can a prenup protect against that? And also, is like if the cop is married to a nurse, is that cop entitled to that nurse's retirement benefits as well? Does it work both ways?
Right. Well, typically a nurse doesn't have a defined benefit pension. That's why these defined benefit pension plans are so valuable, because it's a asset. Like I said at the beginning, it's worth 1.2, 1.4 million. Now, so let's say a police officer gets divorced. So again, how much she could end up getting from the pension depends upon how long they were married. If he was a police officer for 8 years and then they were married for 10 years, and then he retired after 25 years, she's only going to get 10/25 of that pension. She's not entitled to it all, unless she has an extremely good lawyer. Now, the other fallacy out there is that if you're going through a divorce, you can't get a lump sum payment for this defined benefit pension. I've had a lot of bad attorneys call me up and go, hey, my client would like to get a lump sum from this defined benefit pension. I'm like, not under Pennsylvania law. You can't pay out a lump sum for that portion. So if she's going after his pension, she can get a part of it depending upon how long they were married, et cetera, but she can't get a lump sum. What I always counsel police officers to do is give other assets. Give assets out of the 457 plan, equity out of the home, do whatever you can to protect that pension. Because if you think about it, you retire at age 52, 55, 56, whatever, you could have 30 years of that pension benefit being paid to you. Do you really want to give a portion of that to an ex-spouse, especially if you end up getting remarried too? So there's some things, there's some strategies that you can do. Typically a prenup is always a good idea, no matter if you're a police officer or not. But again, anytime there's a defined benefit pension involved, you're vulnerable for them going after that pension.
All right, Chris, I got a quote from this book right here. It's on page 18 from this chapter. Quote, I strongly urge a police officer to give up other assets such as a house to protect not having to give up 50% of the defined benefit monthly income. That, my friends, is a bold statement. That's a very bold statement, because houses are incredibly valuable. People rely on their house for retirement and inheritance. When my grandmother passed away, God rest her soul, she left multiple properties to my mother and her sister. Mm-hmm. And guess what? My parents retired off of them. Yeah. So you're gonna tell me this. If you're in divorce, it's, hey man, give up the house more than these cop benefits.
Yeah. Well, and it depends how much equity you have in your house too. I mean, if you have a $600,000 house that's, you have free and clear and it's worth $600,000, you're not going to give up all the equity in the house. But again, that defined benefit pension, literally, if you do the math, you're talking, let's say your officer, retires and he's getting a $50,000 a year pension and he gives up half of that. That's $25,000. He could be giving up that for 20 years. That works out to be $500,000. So again, let's say our officer is getting divorced, has a $400,000 house and he has 300,000 in equity, might be smarter to give up much more of the equity to his soon-to-be ex-wife than to sit there and pay her 50% of, the pension for the rest of his life is what it ends up being. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess when you run the numbers and do the math, that makes more sense. But that quote just blew my mind because I was like, I couldn't imagine giving up my house to anybody, right? I don't even have a house, right? So,
well, the best way not to do it is, it's funny because I when I talk to these young police officers, I'm like, what are the two, biggest mistakes that police officers make? And there's always a young officer in the front that goes, getting married. I'm like, okay. No. I said, no, the two biggest mistakes they made is over leveraging too much debt and not saving enough in their 457 plan. But it's funny because younger people are very sensitive, to divorce nowadays, which rightfully should be. But police officers have to be even more sensitive because they have a valuable asset in their defined benefit plan. So.
Well, people need to start looking at marriage as what it is in the eyes of the law. Right, marriage is great. I love my girlfriend. I'm sure we're gonna get married. The whole lovey-dovey ceremonial, right? We do the wedding, the honeymoon, the bridal shower, all that fun stuff. But at the end of the day, a marriage is a legal piece of paper. It's a legally binding document that connects your taxes and your money.
Yep.
Sign a prenup.
So it was funny because we had an officer got his pension. He retired. He got divorced. So his first wife got 50% of it. Well, then he got remarried again 2 years later, got divorced again.
Oh, my God.
And now, he kept coming to the pension board meetings going, is there any way I can get more of a pension? Because I'm paying for my first wife 50% of it. My second wife, I can't pay her any more out of the pension. I have to write her a check. And then he turned around and got married the third time. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So, again.
The wrong partner, man.
Yeah, exactly. Finish one thing before you start another, but you have to realize, obviously, your vulnerabilities as well, how vulnerable you are.
Right. So that brings us, okay, let's say we got the cops who make it, happy wife, happy life, or happy husband, happy life, whatever floats your boat there. Approaching retirement, right? So you're getting down towards the end. You recommend tracking every pay stub during the last 36 months, which is the last 3 years. So let me ask you, what tools are available to help police officers do this? Are there apps? Are there AI that can kind of track it? Or is it really done by hands and up to whose responsibility is it? More the municipality, or is it more the officer? And who provides those resources and whose responsibility is it to seek out those resources?
Yeah. So, again, not to denigrate the finance directors of municipalities, but unfortunately, we've seen situations where the calculations are not as accurate as they should be. Mm-hmm. It's sometimes as simple as just taking the W-2 pay stub and saying, okay, in 2022, 2021, and 2020, I made this much, add them up, divided by 50%, and divided by 3, and this is what my pension's going to be. I always tell police officers that when they're calculating your pension or the amount that's going to go into your drop/pension, you should get the calculation worksheet that shows the W-2 information that was given to the actuary to calculate your pension. So, again, trust but verify, because, in the end, it's the municipality's responsibility to provide the correct W-2 information. But I had a police officer who had a spreadsheet that literally he put every paycheck in, and he knew down to the penny what his pension was going to be, and then how much his drop money was going to be on a monthly basis. So it's really, unfortunately, up to the police officer to make sure you track it. But I always say to any police officer, get the pension calculation worksheet, check it against your W-2 to make sure that those numbers match, for the time period that they're going to be using the calculations for.
Well, luckily the W-2 makes it a lot easier, because I was saying like every month pay stub. That's what I like when I read that. That's what I was thinking, like every single weekly paycheck or what have you. But yeah, W-2 makes a lot more sense. It's all
but sometimes an officer retires mid-month and they got to do the calculation, and I'm like, okay, go back and see what the W-2 information was that they gave to the actuary, so you can make sure the calculation's right.
Now, would that be like that income? Is that pre-tax or post-tax?
It's going to be pre-tax. You want to use the W-2 is what you want to use. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, That sucks. Taxes sucks. All right. So like an officer leaves a drop account early. Are there any penalties? More taxes, fees, anything like that?
Yeah, no. And what we tell officers in drop all the time is if you sign up for a 4-year drop, I've seen a lot of, again, let's go back to our, example, officers getting $50,000 a year as a pension. That $50,000 goes in the drop account. I've seen officers get round numberitis where, their account gets to be $100,000 and they're like, you know what, I'm done. I can't turn the car into the, parking lot anymore. I'm going to retire. So an officer can leave the drop early. A drop is an irrevocable benefit. Once you sign up for the drop and you're in it, you can't go, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to keep working. You're in the drop. You either run it to the end of the drop or you leave early. It's up, it's really up to you. No penalties. And again, any money that's in the drop rolls over to an IRA along with your 457. And so eventually you're just going to have one big IRA that then you can manage. Now, an interesting situation on IRAs for law enforcement is that we talked about how many times officers retire at age 53, or let's say they're in a drop for 3 years, so they're retiring at age 56, and they have rolled over their 457 in their drop, and they have this $400,000 IRA. Now, in anybody else, age 59 and a half or under, you get a 10% early withdrawal penalty for taking money out of an IRA. That's not the way it is for law enforcement. Law enforcement, and they just updated the law too, to include firefighters and public safety people, that if you're 56, 57, 58 years old and you take money out of your IRA, you're still going to pay taxes on that as if it's ordinary income, but you do not have the 10% early withdrawal penalty.
Is there any way an officer can lose these benefits? Like, they're a dirty cop, they're a crooked cop, they're a criminal, and like if they end up going to jail, let's say, or they end up getting not like dishonorably discharged for like the military does, but like if they end up getting, if they get fired, they get canned.
In the state
they
of
do something they're supposed to do, they can lose these benefits.
Yeah, in the state of Pennsylvania, if you're convicted of a felony offense, you can lose your retirement benefits.
Well, that makes sense, right? There's some business out there. All right. So
it's very serious. It's very serious. And in my career so far, I've only seen, thank gosh, I've only seen one police officer that ended up having that happen to him. So,
well, there's always one, right? When they say one apple spoils the bunch.
Yeah.
So, just be a good cop out there, right? If you're a good cop, I really hope you deserve all these benefits and more. Because I
and you know what? It's funny you say that because, again, not to get political, but I've dealt with law enforcement for 35 years, and I can tell you these guys are good guys. These guys are, I mean, they're really good to hang around with. Mm-hmm. The bad apples, it's like any industry. I would have to say in the last 10 to 15 years, the bad characters have really been run out of the industry. There's a lot of, no pun intended, self-policing going on. Okay. But, police officers know. And again, the other thing, this goes back to my theme on why it's a great time to become a police officer, is training. I mean, these guys are getting training all the time now. Sometimes it's mandated, but a lot of them that are professional are going out and getting more training on their own because they realize this is my job. Just like I'm an investment advisor, I go to conferences all the time, and you have to do it. You have to know what's, the latest thing, how do you do it, et cetera. So again, it's just, we really enjoy working with police officers. They're just a great group of guys, and women, just a great group. So
scams, I can't say I'm surprised there's scams out there because people scam everything. I got 2 scams today. People reaching out to me, one from my bank and one was a phishing email from my work. So yeah, scams, man. What are the most common scams to look out for with these things? And how can you spot a scam for something like this? Yeah.
So what ends up happening, I told you, there are some people in the financial world that are beginning to realize that when a police officer gets to his end of the career, he could have $200,000, $300,000 in his 457 plan. He could have $200,000, $300,000 in his drop. So he's rolling over to an IRA, $500,000. Well, when investment professionals, non-ethical investment professionals find that out, they're like, wow, that's, we got to start going after these guys. And so the number one scam that I see out there is they're like, hey, Mr. Police Officer, at your end of your career, how about when you roll over your IRA, we do a guaranteed income annuity inside your IRA. Well, I can go on for 20 minutes, but I'll give you the short version why you don't want to do an annuity inside an IRA. An IRA is already a tax-deferred account. An annuity is a tax-deferred account. The only reason why they put these guaranteed income annuities inside an IRA is people hear the word guaranteed income, 4, 5, 6% a year. What they don't hear is that the fees are tremendously excessive. The upfront commissions on guaranteed income annuities are anywhere from 8 to 15%. So let's just say you got a kind of a good one where the upfront commission is only 10%. You're rolling over $500,000 from your drop in your 457 into an IRA inside a guaranteed income annuity. You just made that guy a $50,000 commission. Now, the other thing is your money is locked up forever, because what ends up happening is they have super high declining back-end sales charges that start out at 15% the first year, 14 the second, 13, 12. Literally, they go on for 15 years because they want to lock up this money. Now, they'll say, what we're doing is we're going to give you a guaranteed income of 5% whenever you turn the income on. An officer hears guaranteed income and he's like, wow, man, that's what I want. Well, okay, if you leave it in the IRA inside the guaranteed annuity, guaranteed income annuity for 15 years, and then turn the 5% on, okay, you're going to be getting 5% a year, but you're paying upwards of 2.5% a year for that privilege. You are much better off rolling that account over to an IRA and hiring an investment advisor who's going to run a portfolio for you and charge you 1%, 1.25% to manage the account, whether it's in mutual funds or individual stocks or bonds, and then take out your 5%. So to me, the biggest scam out there is these guaranteed income annuities. Putting an annuity inside an IRA is never a good idea.
All right. Good to know. Excellent. All right, Chris, we're almost done here. We're wrapping up, but you also struck another nerve with me. This term side hustle. Now we're gonna get at side hustles, but for the record, I despise the word side hustle. I hate the term side hustle. This as a friend, please never use that term in front of me ever again. But all right, so side hustles, because here's why. There's no such thing as a side hustle. A side hustle is a second job. Right? Like people say, is your podcast a side hustle? No. This is a full-time job. I just do it while working another full-time job, right? Weekends, mornings, afternoons, whatever. So the term side hustle, it's a common phrase, so we'll use it. So when it comes to police officers having second jobs, as I'm going to call them, any restrictions? Every industry has conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
Like other than working for another municipality, I can't think of one. Like if a cop wanted a landscaping business they do on weekends or their time off, I can't see it being an issue. But bureaucracy's a bitch. So any conflicts?
Yeah, I haven't really seen anything. Most of the second jobs I've seen are, landscaping is very popular with police officers. Training companies have become extremely, think about these guys. They go through 20 years of training and they can turn around and create a company, a training company, to leverage their knowledge off of. That's becoming very popular. Consulting has become popular too. But again, the profession kind of lends itself to that because, many times you might have 4 days on and 3 days off. And so you work a 10-hour day. Well, now you got 3 days off and you can go do landscaping, cut down tree, whatever the case may be. But I've seen many of the entrepreneurial police officers out there. I would have to say, side hustles or second jobs are very prevalent amongst law enforcement because, again, some of them, go drive, cars, because they can provide protection that the average citizen, these guys are, trained to carry a firearm. So, if you have somebody that's like, hey, I need a, limo ride here or whatever, and I need, more heightened security, that's what they end up doing. I mean, a lot of them, some of them get into the whole crime scene reenactment or traffic, reenactment where they start a second career or second, side hustle where there's an accident happens and the police officer writes a report, but for the court, they have to, really, create the picture and do that. So I have an officer that does that. There's a lot of guys that are doing processing evidence. Something happens and the evidence has got to be processed in a certain chain of custody. We all learned that with O.J. Simpson, so that, it's done the right way. So there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of specialized training, these guys get that they turn in and they leverage off of it. And to me, I think it's a good idea because what ends up happening is, again, they end up retiring, typically rather early, mid-50s, and, they're like, hey, I need something to do for the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah,
and they
one right into the other.
Yeah. I mean, I have a police officer who's wildly successful. He started a training company over 10 years ago. He never even went into the drop because he was making so much more money from his training company. And now he's a retired police officer. His training company is doing extremely well. He's an extremely intelligent police officer financially, not just because he has me as his advisor, but from a strategic standpoint, what he did to set the company up, we helped him with his retirement plans. He's got a very, very good game plan. And you can do that if you have a second job. You can set up different retirement plans because, let's say in a second job, you make an extra 20, 25 grand a year. Well, you can set up a one-person 401k and shelter all that money in addition to, what you're doing as a police officer.
Right.
So
you can maximize it out because it's already extra income anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I see a lot of them, some of them just treat it as a job, but for the most part, I see a lot of, believe it or not, a lot of entrepreneurs. And that's why I always tell, whenever you ask a police officer, they're like, like my son's thinking about becoming a police officer. And I've grilled him over and over again because I said, every police officer I've talked to has said, don't get a criminal justice degree and, totally worthless degree.
Yep.
When it comes to law enforcement, what you want to get is a business degree. And, that's really what they need is a business degree to understand, what to do with their second job. So
it's interesting. My buddy of mine from college, he was a criminal justice major and now he sells commercial real estate. So
yeah.
It's very valuable what he did with that. So
right.
shout out to my buddy Kevin. I'm glad he's doing well. The landlord on Instagram, he's doing very, very well. So post-retirement, you tell this story of a captain who paid off his boat and got a high tax bill. And Chris, the story just broke my heart.
Yeah.
You advised him to pay it off over 4 years to avoid taxes.
Yep.
So he didn't, and he got the huge ass tax bill.
Yep.
My question is this: why is the system, meaning like the money withdrawn, considered income?
Well, it all ends up in an IRA. Like I said, the drop money, the 457 money ends up in an IRA. And again, it's education. I mean, I think many times my job as a financial advisor is not so much how to invest people's money, but it's to keep them from doing stupid stuff.
Yeah,
and
how to spend that money. But like, but why is even like, isn't it better to pay it off all at once? Why is the system set up to encourage payments over time? Like if you have the money to pay for it up front, why are you penalized for that? That's very bizarre to me.
Yeah, well, what we try to do is it all comes down to your taxable income. So, I mean, everybody likes to make more taxable income, but what you don't want to see, and any CPA will tell you, you don't want to see a big spike here and then it come down. And so in his particular case, I kept telling him, don't pay it off, don't pay it off, don't pay it off in one lump sum. You have to structure it that you take 20 grand a year out over 5 years to make it look like you're only making an extra 20 grand a year. I'm like, if you take out 100 grand, it's going to make you look on top of your pension like you made $200,000, which jacks you up into the next tax bracket. And in his case, it did. And he paid a severe, not a penalty, but he paid a tremendous amount in taxes. And so he should have had a CPA. He did his own taxes, and he should have listened to us about not taking out gigantic sums of money. I mean, you can take, don't get me wrong, you can take money out of your IRA. It's your money inside your IRA, but you need to strategically take it out so that you're not causing these huge spikes in income, which then jacks you into another bracket. So
that makes sense. It's just, if you're going to have the money, sometimes you got to be a little hush hush about it.
Right. Yeah. You have to have a strategy to pay it off. And I've seen, we had one officer literally buy a farm, and I said, you're going to get crushed, but we broke it up over 2 separate years, that he took the money out and he ended up buying the farm and he ended up paying the taxes on it. But for the most part, the ones that, come up with a strategy, for example, one of the other questions I get is, hey, I'm going to retire and I want to pay off my house. My first question is, well, what's your mortgage rate? And everybody answers the same thing. Oh, I owe 100 grand. I'm like, no. I don't care how much you own. What is your rate? Oh, I refinanced 2 years ago. My rate's 2.75%. I'm like, you are never paying that off because you will never see a mortgage rate at 2.75%. So even if you're retired, that's the cheapest money you could possibly have. Now, eventually you might pay it off because at the end of the loan, it's going to be mostly principal and very little interest. But, to pay off a mortgage early is a bad idea, especially if you have an extremely attractive rate, because you're never going to see a rate like that again.
It's just so bizarre to me, right? It goes against conventional wisdom. I have money to afford something, but don't pay for it.
Right.
Exactly. I already bought it. I have the money to pay for something I already bought, but don't do it.
Right. You just have to be smart about it.
It's so weird. It's so weird.
There's good debt and bad debt. And like, if you have good debt at 2.75% on a property that's appreciating, that's great, because I can turn around and take your $100,000 and make you 5-6% little or no risk. So why not create that arbitrage where you're making more with the money you already have versus paying off the debt, which is at a very low rate.
Right. So. Well, it's the same thing with like annual fees. Look, I understand commission, right? You're doing a job, you're doing a service. You need to be paid off the money you make for them. That's, right. That's just quid pro quo. That makes sense. But annual fees, you're punishing me for making money.
Yeah, well, the way we operate at our shop is we're a registered investment advisor. So, for example, if somebody rolls over 457, drop account to it, it's a $100,000 account. We charge 1.25%. So that's, $1,250. We bill it quarterly. It's not $1,250 each quarter. It's about $300. What's good about doing that is that we are really engaged. I had a famous banker tell me one time, he's like, you want to take a little piece of the business as it goes by. Don't charge them a lot up front. Don't penalize them if they leave. But we are very cognizant, because I'm trying to get that $100,000 account to $200,000 to $500,000 to $1 million. At $1 million, we drop down to 1%. But again, all the transactions inside that account, you don't pay any transaction charges. You buy a mutual fund, you buy a stock, you buy a bond, CD, buy or sell. Nobody pays transaction charges anymore. You may pay a tiny little platform fee. Some mutual funds charge a $5 or $10 platform fee for the custodian. But all in all, the main reason why you want to be charged a management fee is because that person that's managing your money is trying to make your money grow. I have people come to me all the time and they're like, my guy hasn't called me for 2 or 3 years. I invested $100,000 with him 3 years ago. I'm like, oh, and I look at what they invested in and it was, basically what they call front sales charge mutual funds. I'm like, well, did you give the guy any other money? No, I haven't given him any money. I'm like, well, he made his commission up front. He's not really interested in talking to you unless you give him some more money. So the industry has really gone to a management fee, which I think is good, because obviously everybody's got skin in the game that way.
Right. Well, that makes sense, right? It's a service, right? If it is just kind of just looking at it, writing a report, I'm here if you need me. I have a financial advisor through Ameriprise, which is my investments are for, right? I talk to him maybe once a year around tax season to see where I'm at. If I want to make a move, or I'm like, keep an eye on it. That fee is deserved because he's actually, doing something.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. All right, Chris. The last thing, the journey of the 3 officers. You got Officer Long Term, Detective Doubter, and Chief Procrastinator. I bet you came up with those all by yourself.
Oh gosh, and like I said, I got to be careful not to put names with them, but
well, of course, right?
You can't. I've seen these officers over and over in my career, and that's why we came up. But Officer Long Term, young guy, may not be super financially astute, but he knows he needs to save money. He gets right in as a police officer, puts money in his 457 plan, tries to put as much as he can, doesn't over leverage, buy too big a house or a car, gets married. He understands that there's an end game here is what he ends up doing, and he's preparing them. And hopefully by us writing our book and getting it out to younger police officers, they realize I need a strategic plan early on in my career. Detective Doubter is that guy 10, 12 years from retirement. He's kind of been through the mill a little bit. He may or may not be a little sour on his profession, but he really hasn't saved enough money. But again, he's got too big a house with a mortgage. He needs a job where he's making 140 grand a year. Again, we're trying to get these people, and we use examples in our book. We've run spreadsheets through them showing just by doing this, here's how much money you're going to have at the end. And it's never too late to start. And that's, police chief procrastinator. I get police chiefs, they've been making a lot of money throughout their entire career. And all of a sudden their career is starting to wind down and they're like, whoa, I need to do something. I got 4 years for retirement. And so again, if they get a strategy, focus on their 457 plan, get their debt under control, they can get to the end game is what they can end up doing. Because unfortunately, this is the only job I know where you can leave your house in the morning, kiss your wife and kids goodbye. You may not come home, or you may not, have a job, at the end of the day. So, they deal with a lot of risk, and they'll tell you 98% of my job as a police officer is pure boredom, followed by 2% of sheer terror. And again, the reason why we wrote this book and we're doing a podcast like this is we're hoping, that if we can help one police officer have a better retirement, we'll feel fulfilled.
Well, I hope we do that. I'm the boys in blue. I'm wearing blue. My shirt's blue. I'm wearing that for you guys because, you guys have a tough job. I don't envy it. I'm glad someone's doing it. To the ones who do it right, thank you. To the ones who don't, find another career. But it's a tough job. I have a lot of sympathy, and I'm glad this book exists. I learned a lot from this book, and I'm not even a cop, and I found it very interesting. It's very easy to read. It's a quick read. You break it down very, very well. Those charts in the back with all the money breaking down, you make it make so like a layman like me understands it, and it makes me want to explore other options I have, even with my own employer, and like as a self-employer, right? As Ambiguous Podcast Solutions, I'm going to use something like this to kind of figure out, once I have employees, what kind of plans do I want to have, my 401k, and all that kind of stuff. So thank you, Chris. I really appreciate your time. Anything else you want to cover about this book before we say goodbye and head home?
All I can say is that, they should get the book. They should read it, and they should literally keep it in their patrol car. And when they're bored, read it again, and come up with some kind of strategy. Because again, many police officers have a lot of downtime. A lot of them educate themselves very well. I'm very surprised how astute they are on a lot of subjects. And again, we're just trying to get them, to the end zone of retirement is what we're trying to do.
All right, excellent. That brings us to the end of the podcast. Chris Englebert, please tell everyone where they can find you, your social media, your website, where they can find more information, where they can buy the book, and anything else you want to plug. My friend, the floor is yours. Yeah, great. Thanks, Will. So you go to our website. It's literally englebertfa.com, www.englebertfa. It's englebertfa.com. Go to our website. Many videos for police officers are on our website there, along with other educational videos. You can download my app on your smartphone. I have an app. So if you text Chris E, CHRISE to 36260, you'll get my app on your smartphone. Why do you want my app on there? The first page of my app is a great way to contact me, text, call, email. We text a lot with police officers. We know you guys love to text. And so you can text me at any time. My cell phone's on there to answer questions. So download my app by texting Chris E, CHRISE to 36260. We do videos literally on a weekly and monthly basis. There are a lot of good educational videos there too. But again, I can't say enough about about our website because again, we do a tremendous number of videos on our website. It was funny. I had a police officer. We actually have
3 45-minute videos, and this podcast is going to be on our website as well. But I've had officers tell me they've watched our videos numerous times to educate themselves. So it's a great resource. We hope to be a resource. Our book's available there. As a special offer to any podcast listeners here on the Will Tarashuk podcast, if you contact me by emailing me, Chris, CHRIS, at Englebert, ENGLEBERT, FA.com. Email me, tell me you listen to the podcast. We're going to send you the book for free. So just that's one of our thanks for listening to the podcast. Anything we can do to help, we're here.
Excellent. All right, Chris, thank you so much. And everyone on the Talking with Tarashuk feed, my name is Will Tarashuk. It's T as in Thomas, ARASHUK. Also, not the Talking with Tarashuk feed. It's going to be on multiple feeds. Who knows what's going to be? It's going to be everywhere. My name is Will Tarashuk. I am the host of Talking with Tarashuk podcast. This is going to be released on that feed as well as any of the feeds in the near future. Chris's website, my website, YouTube. Subscribe to us on Talking with Tarashuk. If you want to be a guest on Talking with Tarashuk and be like a situation just like this, where we can talk about anything. Hey, if you're a nurse, you want to write a nurse book, you want to do a podcast just like this, the Talking with Tarashuk podcast is a service to you. And that means you get the full audio, you get the full video, you get me as a host. You get to see this mug for a full hour and ask insightful questions. It's a lot of fun. I love doing this. I then go back and cut a lot of clips. So for this particular podcast, we're going to have about 8 to 10 long form clips, about 5 to 10 minutes, about 15 to 20, and maybe even 25 shorts. I think, Chris, our last podcast got 36. Went a little overboard. So we'll see how many I can get out of this, but you also get clips, download links for all of those. You can use them across your website, anything you want, as well as social copy. The social copy I use for my podcast distribution, as well as YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram Reels, the whole 9 yards. Email me, will@apspodcast.com. That's podcast.com. And we'll see you there. But until then, y'all take care.